Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up, almost all the news we hear out of Israel and the Palestinian territories is about conflict and violence. But there are people on all sides working for peace. We'll meet two of those individuals next, a Palestinian and an Israeli, brought together by Idahoans. That's Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. It often seems as if the most intractable conflicts in the world are the ones between Israelis and Palestinians. Over the years, the promise of peace has been tantalizingly close. But just as quickly, those agreements fall apart, and the situation once again sinks into violence and retribution. Within Israel and the Palestinian territories, though, there are many people quietly working together for peace. Today, we meet two of them, brought together by Idahoans. Eden Fuchs is a retired colonel in the Israeli Defense Forces, and Ibrahim Issa is the director of the Hope Flowers School in Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank. Together, the two also co-manage the Center for Emerging Futures in the Middle East, a nonprofit devoted to creating dialogue between Palestinians and Israelis. The center was started in 2004 by Whit Jones and his wife, Paula. Mr. Jones is the founder and chief executive officer of Business Psychology Associates in Boise, a firm that provides mental health services to companies as well as to governmental entities such as the state of Idaho. The three are in Boise to meet with members of the Jewish and Muslim communities here and help raise awareness of their projects. Welcome. Or I should say shalom and salam.
Thank you.
Two words that are very similar and of course mean welcome and also peace. First of all, to you, Mr. Jones, many people might say, why did you start a nonprofit to work in this area that is so difficult? What motivated you?
Throughout my career as a psychologist and as a businessman, I've been very interested in the role of foundations and how they can affect the community. I've served on some boards, helped start the Idaho Community Foundation. And throughout the course of that, found that to be particularly rewarding to me. And as I got to the point of being ready to pass on the leadership of my company to the next generation, I began to look, is there some other area in which I could do something and maybe have a positive impact? I had some experiences with, in one case, a Israeli and a Palestinian that led me to think, gee, maybe a psychologist out in Boise, Idaho could actually do something that could be of assistance in this situation. And
what's been the reaction?
The reaction, I get lots of different reactions. I get a generally positive reaction when I'm over there, when I'm in the Middle East. When I'm in Idaho, the reactions are often incredulous. At other times, you sort of see people's eyes glass over as they sort of are reacting to the fact that to them that's so far away it can't be interesting. Other people are extremely intrigued with what we're doing and want to know more.
And what is your goal, ultimately?
Our goal is we think there's a niche for people who aren't trying to do something at the political level. When I first talked to the two men I mentioned, and I talked about could we do something that would be of assistance, their response was, if you're coming to fix it, you probably should stay home. But if you want to help a few families, a few villages, a few individuals, the opportunities are limitless.
So you set up the Center for Emerging Futures, and one of the things that it does is conversations. Mm-hmm. And Ibrahim, you met Ibrahim first, right? Mm-hmm. You were referred to Ibrahim by a friend of yours. Uh-huh. Ibrahim, what did you think when you heard about Whit and wanting to come? Just another person wanting to do something good, or you work a lot with people from outside countries.
Sure. First, he invited me to be in the second gathering that he held there together with some Palestinians, and immediately I was caught and felt attracted actually to this model to bring Palestinians and Israelis together, and not only for dialogue but also to look beyond dialogue and to form partnerships together, which is in my opinion something unique there.
And we'll talk about that in a moment, some of the projects that have started out of these dialogues. And then you came into this process because you started attending these discussions, yes?
Yes, that's right. When I finished my army service, which took almost 20 years, I knew I had to meet Palestinians, and I had to meet them in person, and not only through the strategic, conflict. And then a friend of mine told me about these gatherings, and I came with trembling legs to the first conference.
Trembling legs, even though you had been in the
Definitely,
military.
I was so afraid, emotionally, not so much physically, but emotionally. I was afraid what I was going to meet, what kind of feelings I'm going to meet, and from myself and from others. And then I couldn't stop. I came to the next and the next, and I met Whit there, and I saw what a wonderful job he's doing.
Did you have the same feelings as well of trepidation or fear in meeting Israelis, or had you worked with them enough with your Hope Flowers School that you didn't have those same feelings?
No, I did not have any kind of fear. For many years I grew up. My father was one of the people who established and promoted nonviolent resistance for Israeli occupation, but also he saw Israelis as partners in this. So we had Israelis always at home coming for lunch or for dinner. So for me, Israelis were ordinary people where I can meet and connect with, and still having a cause.
Having a cause?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, and which is liberation, but also and building a society in a non-violent way. So for me, meeting with Israelis was something natural, and I grew up in this environment.
Now, when you grew up, did you know Palestinians?
No, not at all. Not at all. I had no idea, except for the general information you get from the media or from the government, which goes through also the education system, the books, which basically just simplifies this, alienates them, and just colors the Palestinian as one entity, which is a threat.
And in the military more so then as well?
No, I don't think so. The thing is that the military has a mission, and I still think that the military has an important mission, and they do their best. Just generally speaking, I think the policy that puts the military in the position of occupying and making a military regime, occupation over Palestinian is very, very problematic. But most of the people in the military are complex in the way they see it.
Yes, as we saw from watching, if you haven't, The Gatekeepers is a very interesting documentary.
That's right.
With the former heads of the Shin Bet, essentially the FBI, talking about their conflicted emotions. Before we talk specifically about the projects on the ground that you're working on, what made you, as a retired colonel in the military, want to then take those steps into conciliation or working on it with a group? We should say that these conversations are held on the Palestinian side. So what made you, what was the transformation or the moment? It probably wasn't one moment.
No, I think it was always within me, but I think that although there is an integration that I feel between the need and the personal need to work on the security and the future of the people and my kids and my children's children, in the physical, in the military, in the more traditional sense, in the more popular sense that most people look at it, it is with the same importance that I see that my involvement in this would be.
So it's a security, almost a security issue as well.
Yes, it's an existential issue. And the need in me is deep, so much that sometimes I feel that I have no choice, and this is something I must do.
Now let's talk about the projects that you do work on. You have a model that you use that's called the art of hosting.
Yes.
Explain what that is.
Well, it's a set of social technologies that has been found to be quite effective in helping people make a connection with their shared humanity very quickly, And it's a way for people to meet together in a way where we don't have talking heads doing lectures to them. They are interacting at all times with each other.
Do they talk about their shared traumas, or what are they talking about?
They talk. A part of what they do is talk about their personal story. Mm-hmm. We always try to keep it on that level of personal. What's happening to you what happened to you at the personal level? What is happening? There's a period where we go and literally pass the talking piece and share why I'm here and what that means to me. Then there are later stages in which they begin to connect with a variety of people in the Global Village Square meeting. And then there's a final process in which they're encouraged to find out what they personally, we don't come with any agenda about what they should work on or what the project should be, but what they would like to do. And they then have an opportunity to see if there's some other people in this meeting that have a similar interest.
Now, do you mostly include what we would call moderates in your meetings, or are settlers included? Are members of radical groups, Muslim groups included? How does that work?
We do not include settlers, but we work with the majority of the Palestinian and Israeli societies. We do not include only people who are moderates, but also our challenge is to involve people who are not believing in the peace process and not believing in coexistence. And we see this as our major challenge here.
So why don't you include settlers in the conversations?
There is a problem within basically the Palestinian society. They do not accept settlers to be there. Settlements are represented as the occupation. It's the manifestation of the occupation in the Palestinian territories. But we work with the majority of the Israeli society who are not settlers.
And how do you feel about that as well? Is it appropriate to exclude the settlers? Some might say, there's part of the crux of the issue right there. And so why not include some of the ones that maybe have more open minds?
The idea is, the thing is that this is not an ideology. This is a practical consideration in which you want to include as many as you can and not create, and still you have to pay the price that if a certain group will be alienated or very offended by the fact that another group will be there, then we need to take it step by step. As Ibrahim said, the surprisingly large majority, mainstream of both sides are actually wanting to connect to each other and tired of fighting and hating and fearing all the time. So there is a large majority that we still need and can encounter.
And it's interesting, of course, because the media emphasizes the people, maybe what we would say on the fringe, that are not in this space.
Sure.
Let's talk about the projects that you're most proud of, because as you say, out of the conversations, you develop projects that emanate from the local area, and you are having these conversations in a place called Beit Jala.
Yeah.
Is that the way it's pronounced?
Yeah.
It's pronounced. So from that, tell me some of the things you're most proud of, Ibrahim.
Well, I'm proud of everything that's going on, that we are doing there. But I think there are two important projects that makes me and us proud of. One is the Rihla-Tiyul project, which means a trip in Arabic and Hebrews.
Say it again slower.
Rihla-Tiyul.
Rihla-Tiyul. Okay.
Yeah, it's Rihla is the Arabic word, Tiyul is the Hebrew word, means a trip. And it's for youth. One of the Palestinian participants in one evening after the gathering, she said to an Israeli participant that she never seen the sea, and the Israeli participant said, "Okay, I will take you to the sea." And from there emerged a project to bring youth from both sides, once to Palestine and once to Israel, and learn about the conflict, but also learn about the history of the conflict, and to meet with people, which is giving youth the opportunity to connect with each other and to learn more about each other.
So they would visit each other's historic sites, even some museums. I know that one of the trips went to Yad Vashem,
Yes.
which is the Holocaust museum or memorial. And from reading the articles about it, it was the first time that some of the Palestinians really got an understanding of the Holocaust.
Yes, yes, and that's very important for Palestinians to understand the Israeli society, but also to understand how the Israeli society lives and the pain faced by Jewish. But in another trip, Israeli participants came to Palestinian areas and they have visited cities, looked how the Palestinians live there, and have crossed the wall and seen also how the Palestinians live in these towns. So it was very important also for Israelis to see that. Another project we believe that peace is doing. It's not only believing in peace, but also to bring people to work together. Israelis have huge knowledge in the field of disabilities, for example. Palestinians do not have enough expertise or specialists in this field. So one of the projects is a big Israeli organization is helping to train Palestinians and to set a center for children with disabilities in the town of Tarkumia in West Hebron. And this is
West Hebron?
West Hebron, yes, which is very poor and marginalized area also. And I think this project is also unique. We are very proud of.
What are some of the projects that you're proud of as well?
First of all, if I can, I'll refer to the first, to the Rihla-Tiyul. Actually, in the visit, we helped them debrief the visit to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, because we felt, and they felt, it's going to be strong. It was very strong. And I remember a Palestinian participant who said, I have never imagined that my neighbors, he said my neighbors, had carried this collective memory of hundreds and thousands of children getting killed in their minds and hearts. And then one of the Israeli participants said, this morning I came to meet the Palestinians that were supposed to come in through the checkpoint. You know, the Palestinians need to have a permit, and then they stand in lines in cages and tunnels to be accepted one by one into Israel after asking questions, many times difficult questions. And he said that he could never imagine how these people, and he saw workers going to work and people need to go to hospital, and he said that he never imagined. So this brought up so many things that were shared experiences that moment was very, very touching. I could name another project which was a meeting of a computer specialist in which
a hackathon.
So there was an Israeli participant who stood up in the second day of our GVS, said, I'm really into doing all of this special, computer stuff, and I really want to do it. Now I understood, I want to do it with a Palestinian. So we matched him with a Palestinian computer specialist, and after a short while they arranged a big hackathon. It was around 80 people, it was overbooked. And they had their T-shirt, and they still have their website, and it's the first Beit Jala hackathon ever, and there will be more. And there is another series of projects, because many times people say, why, I met this guy, this lady, and we really want our families to meet. And so there have been, I think almost 10 what we call family GVSs, family gatherings.
And GVS stands for Global Village.
Global Village Square. That's right, but we don't arrange that.
It's ad hoc.
They meet and they say that's what we want to do, and we just help them, and hang around just to see and to feel so good about all of these, tens and hundreds of families with children meeting.
And sport is a natural nexus or a natural meeting point for people, and you have mixed soccer groups, yes?
Well, it's we facilitate the meetings of mixed soccer groups. One in cooperation with the Hope Flowers School and an Israeli organization called Mifalot. They bring Palestinian and Israeli youth together to play football as a way to get to know each other as neighbors. And through our expertise all over these years to facilitate joint meetings, we help with that.
And other things that I noticed, you have put together a recipe book and also some fabric projects.
But again, it's not us. We didn't. We just brought the people
yes.
together. That
and then they
came with the idea and they did it. And we just, as I said, we're around just to see everything is okay.
Talk about some of the security issues in doing this. How hard is it to, A, have Israelis come into the Palestinian territories and then continue these type of arrangements, or the Palestinians to come into Israel?
Well, it's very difficult. This is one of the major obstacles facing us in our work there. Sometimes it's we have to evaluate the situation every time and the complexity of the situation. Sometimes we have to cancel an event, or we have to
cancel an event.
Sometimes, and other times we have to reschedule to plan an event for in different period. Sometimes we face difficulties on different levels. Some people are totally against the peace process and the activities. Sometimes it's authority against that. Sometimes it's Israelis cannot get to the West Bank. They need a special permission. And also for Palestinians to go to Israel, they need also permission. So the difficulties are not only on one side, and it's not one form. It's in different forms.
And how are you viewed by the people in your community for working with Israelis?
Well, first, I believe in that our conflict can be solved only by non-violent means. I don't believe in violence. So, and that's some people see that in positive way, but other people also think that it is a passive way in dealing with the conflict. We don't have only one reaction. We have several reactions, but I have no doubt that this is the correct way and the correct approach to address our conflict.
And what about you? What are the general reactions from people around you?
Well, for me, since I'm not under occupation, that's a big difference. But still, I meet a lot of skepticism and a lot of criticism about, why do you invest in that? There's no use. You can't talk to them, although they know I talk to them, continuously. But they say you can't talk to them. You cannot talk to them. And some would say, traitor or something like that. But
traitor,
yes. And but again, I feel that we're all victims, and that we of the educational system, of the socialization process, of our history, in which we carry this feeling of a victim. And I always try to be understanding to that and say, I'll call you, if I invite somebody and he says, why are you doing this? I'll call you next month. Maybe, I'll tell you another story. Rethink about that. Don't worry. I try to understand that indeed, if it wasn't difficult, our work wasn't so important. We start in the point where it is very difficult for people to do this step. So we better have some patience and hug them on the way.
And how do you respond when people say, "Why are you even bothering? It's such a big problem, and you're just chipping at it." How do you believe that these projects in the end might or could work on the larger problem?
I think by involving as many people as possible in meeting and connecting with each other, exploring possibilities for partnership, we only here not address the conflict, but also we are creating a new generation of Palestinian and Israelis who believe in peace and coexistence, which in my opinion will help the politicians at one point to reach an agreement.
Because the political atmosphere in Israel, at least now, is moving more and more to the conservative side.
Well, does that mean I have to give up? I'll answer. First of all, if one soldier will treat one Palestinian in a more humane way, it's worth 20 years of work. If my daughter tells her friends about her Palestinian friends, and brings them small, like young daughters have, and they say
trinkets, yeah.
Yes, and they say, yeah, Palestinians are well, not how we thought. And then it's worth 30 years of work. And I also remember something President Obama said in his last visit. He said, as a politician, let me tell you, politicians do not take risks unless the people make them take these risks. And he was absolutely, I completely agree with that. And when we have not a few thousand, but a few tens of thousands people doing this work, interacting and doing partnerships together, then it will be pressure. And then we're patient.
I know both of you are scientists. In a way, you studied scientists, you studied physics, you studied mechanical engineering. So maybe there's a common bond there in terms of taking a problem apart, looking at it, making a hypothesis, a thesis, and breaking it apart into its components to solve it like you do in science, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, actually, part of the fact that we are doing this work because first we believe in it, and the other thing, we both feel responsible for it, and we do not wait for others. And I think that's the common ground here.
This must make you very gratified to see the project, which I know was established in part after the death of your son, in his name. We only have about a minute left, but some final thoughts, perhaps, about what you and your wife have accomplished here.
Well, what we think we've accomplished to date in the Middle East is that we have established the fact that with the proper kind of hosting, and we think, Paul and I think we can go over, because we don't have an agenda. For the first couple of years, they wanted to know, do you have a religious agenda? Do you have a political agenda? Whose side are you on? And we said, that's not what we're coming from. We're coming to see if we can host the kinds of interactions that will help people discover that shared humanity. Eden gave me some good and some bad news recently. The good news was that we're now touching more than 500 people a year in our activities. The bad news was he thinks it should be 10,000. So the challenge is very big for us of where we're going to go next.
And very briefly, you're going to be doing some conversations in Boise. What's the objective there?
The activities that we have had in Boise were around acquainting people with the process of what we do, acquainting them with the fact that, yes, people from Boise, Idaho could actually make an impact. There are ways you could be involved with it if you want to be. That's our biggest goal.
Well, great. Well, thanks for taking the time for this very small Global Village Square.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning into this edition of Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.